We believe by rewarding climate solutions and warning all the polluters, we will make it profitable to save our planet and super expensive to destroy it.
The circular economy is gaining traction around the world.
We are working on a system of laws and improvements to the system so that you can fix everything.
More than 2/3 of the world economy are covered now by net zero targets.
The initiative is really about bringing together the leading companies that will transform, disrupt, and innovate our way along that pathway.
We are ready to make this transformation the greatest collab in human history.
The future is in our hands.
So what will this require then for us to achieve in Glasgow? But this must be the moment when we say goodbye to yesterday's provision of energy.
We are going to be there by train, of course, and we're going to do daily broadcast in 2 weeks.
We are, of course, really happy to team up with We Don't Have Time during COP26.
We're there really to drive up numbers.
COP26, of course, is critical.
I think the most important thing will be for all member states to understand that the material use should be a priority in their climate policies.
And we will be there and shine a light on what's happening.
For many years, we thought that the oil, coal, and gas, the fossil fuel industry, the transport, the telco industry, that was the biggest cause of human suffering and greenhouse gas emissions. Absolutely not. The biggest industry that touches every human being on Earth, human suffering, human health, and greenhouse gas emissions is the agriculture, seafood, and beverage industries and how we produce and consume food. And so it's the biggest pivotal moonshot moment in history that we have. 9 years left to really fix it. And so I say global food reformist. I think the entire food system needs to be reformed.
For every 2 tons of food produced on the planet, 1 ton is wasted. So around 1/3 of everything that's produced on the planet is wasted. It's over 1 billion tons of food every single year. Now, when you talk about those big statistics, it's hard to get your head around them. So let's just talk about them in a bit different way. You need an area the size of China to grow the food that we throw away every single year.
I think like all these like purpose-driven companies has to help their consumers to find the aha moments, because we are not enough as perfect consumers. We have to become active citizens as we are running out of time and have to act so extremely fast within this.
Restoring nature is so low-tech, and in a time where everything has to be high-tech and complicated, I believe people are in dire need of solutions. So yes, I do believe that consumer-facing communication, whether it comes from brands or from NGOs like ourselves or from governments, is super important when it comes to really changing the mindset and really making this the decade of doing.
It was a great meeting, but the highlight of it is that Jeff Bezos, who was at the meeting, made a big announcement to invest $1 billion for landscape restoration in Africa. I think we need that magnitude of funding. So Jeff Bezos' commitment will come together with another commitment made by 8 financial institutions. So in total now we have $20 billion committed for land restoration in the Sahel from 2021 to 2025.
When we look at what the dietary people say, the specialists, they're looking at the nutrients of this kind of food and they see it's great. You know, it's basically beans in different varieties that you have refined. So you will have a high protein content. You will get a lot of nutrients in it. So we know beans are good for health. And then we can argue about could we produce those kind of foods in a better way? Of course we can, and we will. So I think moving away from as a society, moving away from some of the large-scale farming, monocrops to more regenerative farming, that's what we're going to see.
What can we do as citizens and consumers? Well, firstly, it's about shifting our consumption to start to halve down our own emissions, like moving to plant-based food, reduce food waste, and becoming more circular in our consumption, of course.
Our ask of the policymakers is regulate us. Yeah, that's right. A company is saying regulate us, but we need it. My God, do we need it? We have got to set global standards for carbon accounting and carbon offsetting. Right now, it's a wild west out there. There's lack of clarity, and it feeds greenwashing and delays meaningful action. We need a set of global standards and targets that every company is working to. What's our message for business? Join us. Cut the bullshit. Cut the blah, blah, blah. Let's use our voices together. We can be so much stronger together, and we can drive this change.
I mean, when we think that a cup of coffee is more than 130 liters of water and a hamburger is more than 2,000 liters of water, we should also look at having regulations in that space and rewarding the companies who produce things with a good carbon footprint, but also a good water footprint.
Maybe, as a telecommunication company, as Ericsson, maybe you wouldn't think that.
Welcome to the second Nature's Newsroom on the second day of the second week of COP27 here in beautiful Sharm El-Sheikh, Egypt. I'm so thrilled to be kicking off today with this incredible panel of experts to reflect on water, what we discussed yesterday, Water Day, to think about what's coming up today and what we can anticipate and expect for the coming week as we round out COP27. So, with me today to discuss these topics and much more is my distinguished guest. We have Boholo Kenawendo, Climate Champion Special Advisor, Africa Director. She's also the former Cabinet Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry of Botswana. Welcome, Boholo. Very happy to have you here.
Thank you very much.
We also have Mina Guli, CEO of Thirst. She's also the founder of Run Blue Campaign. Welcome, Mina. Thrilled to have you here as well. And Michelle Teller. Was that somewhat close, Michelle? Somewhat. So Michelle is a research scientist of climate and food at Stanford University. I couldn't think of a more fantastic panel, and I love that this is a panel of women as well. As we saw from that first picture of leadership at COP27, we need a little bit more of this in the picture, right? To have these discussions and make some decisions. So With that, let's get started. I want to get right into your thoughts. I'm going to start with you, Bohalo. Yesterday was Water Day, and I know this is something close to your heart, something that you work on. What would you like to share with our audience in regards to yesterday's outcomes?
Firstly, I think it's important we reflect on the intersectionality of water and Water Day, and just how at the core of climate action, water and preserving water sources and having water delivered to cities and areas is so important. And I mention that because many people yesterday kept asking, why is it that there is a Water Day? And it appeared that it's only for scientists. And I want to really stress that it isn't only for scientists. It is the heartbeat of the ecosystems that everyone throughout COP has been talking about. So when you're talking about nature, you're talking about cities, you're talking about energy, there's always a component of water to it. So it's really critical that we show the importance and highlight water. So for us, we saw a couple of launches and announcements around water delivery in the continent. There was the launch of the Aqua Fund and the Aqua Platform, really showing radical collaboration around delivery of water to cities in the continent.
That's fantastic. So these were positive announcements, you would say?
These were fantastic announcements, and what has been so inspiring for me and really given me a lot of energy throughout the COP is how Africa has shown up in COP, and how the rest of our stakeholders have also shown up for Africa in COP, particularly the non-state actors.
Thank you for sharing that. Let me go to you, Mina. So we were talking about water. Obviously, water scarcity is a real serious issue in many parts of the world, and you're bringing attention to it. It's incredible. You're running over 200 marathons over the course of the year in these water-stressed places. What inspired you to do this? Tell us a little bit about Run Blue campaign.
Yeah, thanks, Sweta. So this year, as you said, I'm running 200 marathons in the lead up to the UN 2023 summit. I'm running because I want to raise awareness about the water crisis. As we've just spoke about, not only the toilets and the taps, but the infrastructure, the nature, the biodiversity that we rely on for the water that does come out of our taps. And I want to also show the urgency of the problem that we're facing. This is not someone else's challenge to solve. This is our problem too. Most of us don't realize that water goes into everything we use, we buy, and we consume every single day, whether it's the clothes that we're wearing or the food that we eat or the power that went into the lights and the microphone that I'm speaking on today. You know, all of these things take huge amounts of water to make. And the consequence of that is that this is going to require solutions and create an urgency that is far beyond just a natural or environmental problem. It's going to cause risk to supply chains, to economies, and to societies around the world. And I have to tell you, I've seen it. I have traveled to these places. I've met the people, the women and the girls who are waiting at the fences for water to be delivered, or walking for hours each day, risking their lives to fetch water. I have been into the factories where they're at risk of closing down because they have no longer got access to enough water to operate. I've been into the fields with the farmers who are despairing for lack of water. I've met 23-year-old farmers who tell me, what hope do I have to pray for rain or to leave my farm? So one of the most critical parts of our campaign is to drive action. Action from companies, from governments, and from individuals. And for me, one of the key success stories from this COP, and I know there are many who don't think that there are any, but I think in the water space, one of the big success stories is the fact that we have figured out how to link water with climate, how to link water to oceans, to biodiversity. We've realized that without water, we cannot create a nature-positive future. So for me, the big success yesterday was to stand in the water pavilion, surrounded by several hundred people, all stepping up from government, society, individuals to make commitments on water. Big commitments like we saw in Africa, but also much smaller commitments like the power of youth to mobilize and create change. And the story about that is that this is a very key stepping stone towards the 2023 summit next year. So for the first time in 50 years, the UN is hosting a summit on water. This is our opportunity to catalyze momentum, to demonstrate not only that this is a problem, not only that it's urgent, but that we need real, concrete, actionable commitments by the time we get to March 2023.
Thank you for that summary. That was very thorough and much appreciated. And you really made a strong point there, which is the role of water is so critical as we talk about the climate crisis, the impacts of the climate crisis, and how we are going to overcome the climate crisis. We need to find solutions for water scarcity, water availability, and how has it been left out of the conversation for this long? That's absolutely unbelievable. So I'm pleased to see that you're happy with what transpired at the Water Pavilion, and that we can look forward to this COP to 2023.
I think one of the other things from yesterday was this acknowledgement that water is not just part of the problem, it can also be part of the solution. You know, people started talking about climate is mitigation and water is adaptation, recognizing and realizing it needs to be a really strong part of whatever future we decide we're going to create. Water needs to be not only part of it, it needs to be front and center.
We hear you loud and clear. And for those thousands, hundreds of thousands that are tuning in around the world right now, join the conversation, engage with us, use the app, and really ask questions to us, to the panelists, and to each other about how you can be part of the solution, especially as it relates to overcoming the water challenges that are so integral to overcoming the climate crisis. So Michelle, let me turn to you, because you really are at the nexus of climate and food. And as a researcher, obviously you think through the relationships across all of these different points. So where does water fit into all of this from your point of view?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And it appears that the work that I've been doing over the last couple of years really is at the intersection of two of the lost children that have been finally invited into the family here at COP. So that's food on Saturday, and then water, which we saw yesterday. And the work that we've been doing really focuses on the role of blue foods. That's the foods that are produced in fisheries and aquaculture, both in our oceans and our rivers and our lakes. And we see that very often when we talk about food in these climate or food system spaces, it often centers just on agriculture and livestock and not on the really important contributions that fisheries and aquaculture already make to healthy diets and livelihoods around the world, but also could make in the future. So we see that these are often species that can be generally very nutritious. They can often be produced with very low carbon footprint. And as I said, support many livelihoods around the world. 90% of actors are small scale. And what I really want to highlight there is this importance of diversity in blue food systems and how some of that nuance often gets lost in these big debates like that. We see that amongst fisheries and aquaculture, there's 2,500 different species that are being produced, and some of those are incredibly nutritious. They can be really low carbon footprint. They can actually contribute to regenerative or nature positive food production, whereas there's these other species that are really harmful for the environment, that can have a high carbon footprint, that are really not much more nutritious than just protein. So as we see demand for these kind of species grow in the future, and we think about how can these be part of low carbon, nutritious future food systems, we really need to invest in the right kind of species, the right kind of systems, and support the actors who depend on them most. And so for me, actually, I don't know if my takeaway from yesterday was as positive as it was for you guys, because I feel like even though these topics are now brought into the debate, we see that they're still extremely siloed. So the people who are most impacted by climate change, who most depend on fisheries and aquaculture, they're not here in the blue zone. They're somewhere else. And I don't know to what extent the negotiators in the other buildings are able to learn from all the lessons that are being shared amongst us here. So, yeah.
You're making a very serious point, and this fly is out for you. I'm so sorry. This is how you know we're live here in Egypt, because the fly is the most popular panelist that we've had in this studio. But let me come to you to please reflect on what Michelle was just saying. I know you would like.
Yeah, I just wanted to reflect on the point that so many people are still left out of this conversation. But most importantly, to what extent do the negotiators really relate to the work that's happening out in the pavilions and so forth? And I wanted to just highlight that throughout the year, we've had so many events and we've had meetings with the negotiators. And one of the examples in the continent is we hosted the Africa Regional Forum, where we created a pipeline of climate action projects and put them in front of investors in order to attract investment into climate action projects. And a lot of them were water. They were water-based, either protection of the sources of water or the delivery of water to cities and human settlements. But what was really critical about that meeting for us, and I'm not saying that this is a silver bullet solution to everything, but what was important for us was that the Africa group of negotiators were in the room to understand what these projects look like and what the challenges are, and to your point, raising that climate action is beyond energy. It deals with issues of water, it deals with issues of carbon markets and protection of nature and so forth. But over and above that, we saw a very increased participation, not only of the Africa group of negotiators and ministers, but the whole world really registering for the Africa Climate Week. Our limit or our target was 3,000 people. We got 7,000 people registering on the second day of the opening. And that, we thought, you know, it showed the interest that was there from non-state actors in particular to really deal with the issues of climate action and really provide solutions to climate challenges in the continent. And that continues to be the fuel for us to do more, recognizing that, you know, the official side, there are still challenges, but we really have to get energy from somewhere and be able to share that with the rest of the people that don't make it into these kind of rooms and be representative of those.
Right, that was a fair reflection, Michelle, and thank you for sharing what is going on outside of the COPs as well. That's important to know that we have this gathering, but there's events throughout the year. This isn't just a one and done. There is hard work and great people behind the solutions that are being discussed that are really working towards implementation. So what are your hopes? I'm just going to ask for your final thoughts. This went way too fast. I have a million questions for you. I really do. You're doing such incredible work. I really would love to bring you back to a future broadcast. But for now, for this segment, please give your final thoughts of what you hope to come out of COP27 and how you hope to further implementations of some of these great ideas and solutions that are being discussed. I'll go to you first, Mina.
So I think that I would say two things. The first one is I completely agree that we need to find a better way of integrating the people on the ground at the front lines of this crisis into thinking through not just framing the problem, but also developing the solutions. The number of people that I have met along my journey that have literally begged me to take action, begged me to tell the people in these negotiations that this is an urgent and critical problem affecting everyone everywhere. You know, for too long, water has been everything, but we've treated it as if it's nothing. And that message needs to come in with a sense of urgency to finding solutions. One of the Indigenous leaders that I met in Australia said to me, decisions would be better if leaders could understand that things are different on the land. It is absolutely true. We need to find a better way of creating a sense of urgency and creating a sense that we have no time to waste and we have no plan B. The second message is it's too easy for these negotiators. It's too easy for the CEOs in the boardrooms and the people in the corridors of power to walk away as if it's okay. It's not okay. We need to explain to them that we can do hard things, whether it's running 200 marathons or whether it's stepping up to solve the global water crisis. We are capable of doing so much more than we realize. And once we realize that, then we can look at things differently because we can understand and acknowledge that getting to nature positive, finding these biodiversity solutions, figuring out how to integrate wetlands and ecosystems into these solutions, they will be hard. And this will not be a simple, straightforward road forward, but we can do it.
We can do it. We can do it as our campaign. We don't have time. I don't know if you did that on purpose or not, but we are trying to convey this urgency exactly. So thank you. You've put that so well. And let me come to you, Michelle. We just have 30 seconds. Would love to hear your final thoughts.
Yeah, I guess for me, my hopes for COP27 is that transformations toward healthy and sustainable diets are meaningfully integrated into countries' climate plans, and not just in the adaptation realm where they currently reside, but also in plans for mitigation. And I think the main challenge now is that we're beyond the point where we're at the luxury of separating mitigation and adaptation and thinking of them as two different tracks. We have to adapt and mitigate at the same time. And so I'm hoping that many of the lessons that we're seeing here about low carbon, climate resilient food systems can be integrated into countries' plans for action.
Well, thank you so much again. I still have a million questions for you, and I really look forward to bringing you back on the broadcast so we can continue this at COP28, before COP28, because as the audience knows now very well, this is work that happens all year round, 24/7. We will come together and overcome this climate crisis. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, really looking forward to our next conversation. Let's bring on to the show 2 youth reporters to discuss what they've been doing at COP and why giving remote communities access to climate news through radio is so important. Well, you're doing some incredible work. I'm really excited to get into this conversation with you. We have Chanda Chabala. Chanda is here. Chanda is a youth reporter for Children's Radio Foundation. And we have Joyce Shyama, also for the Children's Radio Foundation. So, ladies, you're running community-based radio outside of Africa. Oh, and on Zoom, I'm so sorry. Of course, we have somebody joining in from Zoom as well, Mary Ann Nabelli, also a youth reporter from Children's Radio Foundation. So thank you, ladies. Let's discuss what is going on with this community-based radio in Africa. So let me start with you, Chanda.
You can go through your question again.
Tell me a little bit about community-based radio in Africa. What is this organization? What started it? Why are you doing this radio?
Okay, the main reason why I'm doing this radio because as a young person and living in Africa, there are a lot of things that affect us young people, and we not most times have the adults speak for us. We want to speak for ourselves because most of the things that we go through as the young people, we know them, we understand them, so we want to speak for them ourselves. And CRF has given us this opportunity where we get to share community-based radio stations where we go out there, collect reports, talk to young people, know what's on the ground, because we, the young people ourselves, know best what we face and how best we can talk to ourselves.
Okay, that's really important work to be doing. And it must be very challenging, too, to try and reach some of these communities that may not have easy access to this information, but they really need this information. So let me come to you, Joyce. How do you get these messages to those who need it the most, those that can really benefit from it? How do you get the messages to those who can really benefit from the information? How do you reach these people, especially in the rural communities in Africa?
How do I pass this message? Okay, it's not easy to pass this message, but I think that CRF help us to pass this message to youth people, all the youth people in the world, and I think that radio help us to speak to all the world, and by this way we can show the people that youth people can do things which can change the world, and youth people can do good things for the world. So that's
and just to add on what Joyce said, other than radio, for like you said, in rural areas, in areas where radio can't reach, we go to the people, we go out there, we have community mobilization, we have outreaches, because not everybody has access to radio, but in an instance where I want to pass a message and they're able to get it through the radio, we go to them.
Wow. So you're not just putting it through radio, you're actually physically going in person as well. So you're doing what needs to be done to reach everybody. That's fantastic. Marianne, let me bring you into this. The beauty of you being able to join us via Zoom is now we have technology. We have this video function to be able to reach millions of people around the world. So tell us why something like reaching people through radio, through technology, through video can really change the course of the future.
Well, I just want to speak on Africa specifically. I do think that I'm sorry, I do notice there's a bit of a delay, but as I was saying, South Africa as a whole definitely would does still pick radio as its first option. It is very accessible, and that's why we use this specifically with our projects. And it's very easy to access from your car, whether you're cleaning in the house. People can actively and passively listen. I do think technology around the world isn't looking the same in Africa. And that's why our work is so important, to make sure that the people who are most affected by a lot of the things that are happening around the world still getting the message, still getting the education, and most of all are still being heard.
Joyce, let me come to you. How are you feeling about the youth representation here in COP? Are you happy with the amount of youth here and their voices being heard? What are your reflections on this?
Okay, yes. I'm so happy to be at COP because I feel that the COP26, there wasn't the place where youth people was. But today, there is a place where youth people can work, and it's very cool to youth people to be at COP because we bring some new ideas. We bring some new things which can change the vision of the world. And it's very cool, and I'm very happy to be here because I can bring my experience, I can bring something I know to change the world. And I'm very happy to be here because I meet many people, and it's cool because I see that I can do things which can do new things in the world, change the vision, and it's very cool to be here at COP.
We're so happy you're here at COP, and I was just talking about technology and how important technology is, and we've lost the video of Marianne, but I'm sure she will join us. Oh, she's back, exactly. This is how you know this is all in real time. So, Chanda, over to you. Same question. How are you feeling about the youth representation here, and how are you enjoying your time and experience? What are your takeaways from COP?
The youth representation, I feel it could be better, but so far what we have is workable. But then we just don't want to be in stands. We just don't want to be outside. We want to be inside. We want to be where the negotiations are being made. We want our voices to be heard. We want to speak. We just don't want to be to just have limited access. We want to be everywhere, because at the end of the day, whatever decisions are being made at COP27 is going to affect us, because the future is now and not later. So we want to be there. We want our voices to be heard, and not just because it's COP, but then we want even after COP. We just don't want to give our ideas and it ends here. We want it to go out there. What next after COP? And my experience so far has been great, but like I said, we want to be where the big decisions are being made. We don't want to be in the outside. We don't want to be made to be left in the dark. We want to be everything to be as transparent as possible, because youth voices are powerful voices. Therefore, the little spaces that we've been given, yes, we want to utilize them, but at the end of the day is that we want to be where we want to be, because we didn't come here to be inside events and all. We came here to be in the big events, because our takeaway from COP is what we want to take out there as young people, want to go and tell the people that have not been able to make it here. So we want to go back to our different countries. I want to go back to Zambia and tell a young person to say, hey, when I went at COP and this is what happened. And then after, they're able to see the results of why I was at COP. Yeah.
Your voices are so poignant as well. It is absolutely incredible that you are carrying this message back to your home countries, giving information to the people who need them the most, reporting. That's what we need. We need to share this information to be able to protect our futures, to protect our communities. And you're really doing it. And you're really representing your countries and your age demographic, which is just unbelievable, ladies. You're so impressive. Marianne, I'm going to come to you to give some closing remarks on your thoughts of how COP is going so far. What do you think about the youth representation here? And what do you hope to do with the information that you receive from COP to take away and to help your home country?
Well, like Chanda said, I do think that there could be more young people. The fact that I'm here with 2 other young reporters and we can't even get into the blue zone because badges are restricted to certain people is really not nice, especially when you look at the African continent. Majority of the population is young people, under the age of 35. But I'm almost certain that if we were to look at the people in that area, where decisions are being made and negotiations are happening, you're not going to find many people under the age of 35. And so I feel like we need to stop looking at young people as the future and, something that's coming, because we're here right now. And it's like we can't just be sitting and waiting for all these things to happen. And suddenly when this future arrives, we're supposed to be fixing a mess that we didn't create ourselves. So I definitely do think things could be better in terms of the organizational side and making sure that young people not only are part of COP, but are given the platform to speak and be part of understanding what's happening. That's my views and my role 2 cents.
Thank you, Marianne. Powerful words. And yes, we wish you were here too. There's a third seat next to Chanda that should have been filled by you. So we appreciate and understand. And let's solve this. Let's talk about what's happening, with the challenges we're facing, and let's fix it and make it better going forward. But thank you for the hard work you're doing, ladies. Much appreciated. Thank you for sharing your voices.
Thank you.
Next, I'm thrilled to have with me on stage, in studio, Jillian Belopolsky. Please tell me I said that somewhat correctly. And she is the Chief of Staff of External Affairs for the Clean Cooking Alliance. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. So I would like to first ask you, why is clean cooking is a very specific subject within already what is niche, water? It shouldn't be, none of this should be, but here we are. We're making room for these conversations at this broad climate communications conference at COP27. So why is clean cooking fundamental as an integral component of what we're discussing more broadly? So part of climate change, part of nature, part of biodiversity. Let's put it in some context.
Me. Clean cooking is one of the most immediate and cost-effective tools that we have to address the triple planetary crisis of climate change, nature loss, and pollution. Today, unfortunately, 2.4 billion people rely on polluting solid fuels to cook their daily meals. And the health implications of this are well documented. Cooking over smoky, open fires and inefficient stoves contributes to 3.2 million premature deaths each year. But what's less understood is that cooking this way also generates a gigaton of CO2 emissions, the same as the global aviation or shipping industries. And it is responsible for half of human-generated black carbon. 34% of all wood fuel is harvested unsustainably, and it's done so in precious biodiversity hotspots and carbon sinks around the world. And the challenge is particularly acute here in Africa, where the absolute number of people without access is growing. So in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is home to thousands and thousands of acres of forests and ecosystem services that really do deliver 10 years worth of global carbon emissions services, 90% of the population relies on charcoal for cooking. And last year alone, 1 million acres of forests were lost due to wood fuel collection. Conservation organizations like the Gorilla Doctors in Rwanda are telling us that the largest threat to their work in preserving the last mountain gorillas is wood fuel collection, even in protected areas. So it's wonderful to see the increase in commitment and investment in nature-based solutions here at COP, but making good on any of those promises will require us to actually address the drivers of unsustainable biomass loss. And that includes the fact that 1/3 of the world's population is without access. And at the rate we're going, by 2030, 2 billion people will still be cooking this way, making it impossible to meet our climate, nature, and biodiversity goals.
Thank you for putting that into context. It's one of those things that is overlooked, but obviously the impact is massive. And if we can actually discuss this more, get awareness around it, support the solutions, we're going to make a huge positive dent in solving the role that it plays in carbon emissions, right? So we do need to accelerate clean cooking as a focus area. How do we do that? How do we accelerate clean cooking?
So the Clean Cooking Alliance has recently done some research to really put clean cooking in the context of nature-based solution. And this is really the first comprehensive evidence base of the role that clean cooking plays in accelerating and delivering the impacts of nature-based solutions. And we've highlighted fantastic examples from clean cooking enterprises like Sistema Bio, Sequest, and Otago, and conservation organizations like the World Wildlife Fund, who are leveraging clean cooking value chains to deliver nature-positive impacts, contribute to sustainable rural livelihoods. But there is so much more that needs to be done to tackle this issue. Nature loss is accelerating, population growth is increasing, and now is really the time for us to leverage the intensified interest in nature to scale clean cooking and unlock progress. So if we're serious about food security, poverty alleviation, access to energy, climate change, biodiversity loss, then we have to move very quickly from these small-scale siloed interventions to much more holistic and systemic solutions. So for us and for everyone concerned, clean cooking is central to a nature-positive economy, and it should be integrated into the types of landscape-scale conservation and restoration programs that we've been discussing here for the last 2 weeks, and use clean cooking as a way of simultaneously protecting landscapes and improving the climate adaptive resilience of communities who are on the front lines of conservation and restoration.
So in the final minute or so that we have left, what is your call to action? So you're saying this is what we need to do to accelerate the solutions of clean cooking, but obviously there needs to be some policy support. There needs to be various stakeholders involved in this. What do we need? And to the hundreds of thousands that are tuning in right now, what can they do to support this initiative?
Absolutely. We need to empower and support national governments to lead holistic transitions that include clean cooking. And we know right now, and we're working with more than 70 countries who have included clean cooking in their NDCs. They're critical components to meeting their climate and forest targets. They need support and capacity building for planning, and they need funding to implement those plans and strategies. We need organizations, investors, and project developers who are working on nature-based solutions to integrate clean cooking where appropriate, because it can be ineffectual to protect a forest, invest in regenerative agriculture, or restore habitat if the communities living alongside those projects still have no other options. And I have a quote from a charcoal producer in the Democratic Republic of Congo who could say it better than I could. And he says, "We've been taught that cutting the forest will make oxygen disappear. It makes me worried, of course. But what can you do when you see the only way to feed your family is to cut a tree? There is no other choice." But there is a choice. We have the technology and the know-how to deliver clean cooking solutions to every person in the world if we make it a priority. And if we don't, millions of lives are at risk. We're threatening to undermine billions of dollars in climate mitigation and adaptation investments, and it imperils the future of all of us and our planet.
Well, thank you for putting that so powerfully and clearly. I think the message has been made and will reach those that need to hear it. So thank you, Jillian. Really appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise with us.
Thank you for having me.
Moving swiftly along in our newsroom at the Nature Zone Pavilion here in Sharm El-Sheikh, Egypt, we are going to be linking this summit, the COP27, to COP15. And we are here talking about nature-positive solutions. And of course, the UN Biodiversity Summit is coming up just in a few weeks. And so this conversation is critical, especially thinking through what our takeaways are from COP27 and how they can lead to impact at COP15. So with me to discuss all of this is an esteemed panel. Thank you all for joining me. We have Jens Nielsen, founder and CEO of the World Climate Foundation. Welcome, sir. We have Bardha Kushutani von Kappelgaard, project director of World Biodiversity Summit, also at the World Climate Foundation. I hope I didn't butcher your name too badly.
Just a little bit.
As somebody who has a very difficult name, I completely commiserate. And Alicia Schmid, program manager at the World Climate Summit at the World Climate Foundation as well. So you're all here representing the World Climate Foundation. really excited to get into your thoughts then on your foundation. And let me start with you, Jens. The foundation aims to bring together government, business, finance. You're really collaborative in that sense. And the idea is to support creating a net zero positive world. So what are your successes so far, and what are you still needing to overcome? What are the challenges that still remain?
So let me just mention one case or one example where I think we have some success, is that we, in partnership with the Nordic governments, facilitated 42 pension funds last year in Glasgow, committing 130 billion US dollars to invest in green solutions before 2030, and also agreeing to report on their investments year on year. And that those commitments, those 130 billion US dollars, is given under the condition that the governments provide the right framework conditions. And this year, we also communicate, or the coalition communicated, what would it take for them to invest even more in emerging and developing markets.
Okay, fantastic. And what are some of the challenges then that you're still facing?
Yeah, so you can say, so there's enough capital available in the world to fund the whole Paris Agreement. So that's not the limiting factor. You also got a lot of existing technology that you could scale, renewable energy, nature-based solutions, etc. And there's a lot of innovation going on in finding new solutions. So I would say the limiting factor is often the government side and the regulator side, that they're not moving fast enough in changing subsidies and different incentives from fossil fuels to more green solutions.
We definitely have the solutions. We have the science, we have the technology. We need that political will, that refrain we hear constantly. If only we had the political will.
Yeah.
So I hear you. This is an ongoing theme that we've been discussing through the course of this pavilion and more broadly at COP27 more broadly. And we'll get into it a little bit more. Let me come to you, Bardha. So, is it Bardha? Bardha, okay. So from the United Nations General Assembly in New York to here, to Sharm El-Sheikh, and now to COP15 coming up in Montreal in December, you've been holding a split summit across all three of these, really focusing in on biodiversity. What are the ambitions of all of this effort?
The ambitions, of course, primarily are to link biodiversity and climate. We realized quite quickly that the two are working in silos after the IPBES report that came out in 2019 spring. So we knew we had a really strong network on climate and climate finance, and we want to replicate that success and network towards biodiversity, as it is much needed. So we were in New York, we were in Sharm now, and we're going to Montreal at COP15, with the key outcomes to, as I said, bridging climate and biodiversity, but also accelerating nature-positive financing and investments, also to help build public-private partnerships towards the new global biodiversity framework.
And so all of this is happening simultaneously to these global convenings, right? And so, Alicia, you've been hosting this World Climate Summit on the fringes of COP. The idea is that we can use global convenings to draw attention to additional work and convenings, collaborations that are happening. What have the outcomes been of this World Climate Summit?
Yes, thank you. So this was the 12th edition of the World Climate Summit, the Investment Cup, that we hosted this year over the last 2 days. And we brought together many thought leaders from government, businesses, the finance sector, but also international organizations and civil society. And as my colleague Bardha just said, I think it was a great success to also bring in a lot of topics related to nature and biodiversity to really break silos and bring together all those different stakeholders for joint action, because the businesses are ready, the financiers are ready to also invest, not only in developed economies, but also in emerging markets, but they need support from governments and from organizations to really tackle this challenge together. And I think our summit was a prime example of giving a platform for stakeholders to meet, to connect, to discuss solutions, and to really get the job done together.
You know, we have been hosting this Nature's Newsroom every day, and it's one of the themes that appear every single day, because of course we're talking about food and agriculture and transportation, energy, all of that needs to be solved for us to overcome the climate crisis. But biodiversity, if we really do this right, if we restore and conserve nature, if we begin to respect nature and stop its exploitation, we will achieve up to 40%. Is that correct? You have the statistics much better than I do in biodiversity. But we will be achieving up to 40% of our ambitions and what we need to do to overcome the climate crisis. So is it getting the attention it deserves? Of course, here in the Nature Positive Pavilion, we are giving it the time it deserves, but from your work and experience, obviously you're holding space for these solutions and these conversations, but what would you like to see? Where would you like to see more discussion around nature, nature positive, biodiversity, conservation, restoration? Jens?
So the magic number is 37%. That
if you round up, I was close, right?
Yes, true. Yes, true. Yes. Yes, we can see that biodiversity and nature-based solutions get more and more attention. I also think it's a fact of realization that we don't see the energy transition to clean energy so fast. So the world needs to use use the potential of nature-based solutions. We did the first World Biodiversity Summit in New York this year. We could see a lot of interest from the financial sector, and that's a clear signal that there's a beginning, I would say, more business in biodiversity.
Investing in biodiversity is good for business. Let's talk a little bit about that. Bardo, would you like to share your thoughts?
Of course, nature needs to be part of the equation whenever portfolios are created. Surely, I mean, it is important to invest, for example, in renewable energy pathways, which will help mitigate climate change. But if we do not take nature into the equation, then we're doing more damage than we're doing good. And that's also one of the key aspects of what we're doing, is trying to change the language around nature and biodiversity, so pension funds and asset managers see it as an asset rather than just whatever.
Something to protect.
Yeah, exactly. So we are doing our very best to bring those key stakeholders, but to talk about it the same way they talk about renewable energy, the same way they talk about any of the big topics in the Paris Agreement. So that's our key goal, and I think that's how we can get the investors involved.
And let me come to you. What needs to happen in terms of collaboration to really drive these solutions to commercial viability? So we know we need the financing. We know we need to give this topic more space. We need to increase awareness. And of course, you're hosting events that really bring different stakeholders together. Who's missing from that? And if we do need to make an effort to bring in more private sector funding, for example, how can we support you in those efforts?
Yes,
what is your ask?
Yes, I would say the key statement here would be to accelerate public-private partnerships, to really bring those two sectors together, to work on blended finance models, or to de-risk investments in nature, to make them more accessible, and to really step up the finance that is urgently needed.
Well, it's organizations like yours working in this space that gives me hope that we're not just going to conserve nature, we will restore it, and we will actually bring it back to the glory it experienced before humans started just taking without asking or checking themselves at all. Why do you have an interest in nature, actually, as the founder of this foundation? What actually made you want to focus in on nature in the first place?
We started off with climate, and so we started off after the COP in 2009 in Copenhagen, which wasn't that successful, and where business were not present, and that's one of the reasons why we have engaged and developed our platforms. And I would say that we would like to work with a planet that can exist forever, and to do that we need to move from the more linear business models that we have today to more circular business models.
What are you hoping will come out of this COP now? as we host you, and we created this unprecedented alliance through the Global Commons Alliance that brings together global not-for-profits, and we are amplifying the work of these not-for-profits that are really looking to find these nature-based solutions, get them the resources that they need to really reach commercial viability. What are you hoping will be a real win coming out of COP? This will be your final closing remarks, Barda. So the question is, what are you hoping is coming out of this collaboration in the Nature Zone Pavilion and COP more broadly that will support your efforts and that will help make COP15 really successful?
I think I already see it quite a lot, and my colleagues have mentioned it as well. Nature is involved in almost all the pavilions here, so that I think will already provide so much momentum for COP15. And I'm very happy that it will be a biodiversity day for the first time ever at COP for climate. And I think just talking to everyone and the one listening and just this pavilion in general will hopefully help us bring forward those public-private partnerships that are so needed for the success of the global biodiversity framework.
Thank you for that, Barda. Alicia?
Yes, I think it's also very important to take the lessons learned from climate on the processes in the negotiations and really bring attention to the topic of the interlinkages between climate and biodiversity. So I think those two COPs in very close proximity can really accelerate each other and make a big push forward that we need so urgently.
And let me come to you for your final closing remarks, Jens.
So I hope that this is a COP of implementation. I hope that implementation doesn't end by this week, but this is just the start of a long process in implementing the Paris Agreement.
Fantastic. Okay, so thank you, panelists. Looking forward to seeing what you do going into COP15 and the takeaways from COP15 as well. We will continue this conversation. We will not rest until we really see nature-based solutions at the forefront of all the solutions that we know are going to solve this climate crisis. Together, we'll do it.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, we are now going to host a lead interview and take a look at some actual solutions that are examples of nature-based solutions. This is what we've been talking about. So let's get into this conversation. And unfortunately, this is how you know we're coming in live from Sharm El-Sheikh, Egypt in real time. We are bringing in Mark Harema, CEO of New Light Technologies. Mark Harema, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, so I can hear you. I hope our audience can hear you. I know you're joining us via Zoom, but we cannot see your video at the moment. But we can hear you, and we'd really... Okay, so I can hear you, and our audience can hear you. So let's kick off this interview. Mark Harema, CEO of New Light Technologies. Talk to us about your technology that is now scaling up. What is it? It's biodegradable plastic from the air. That is something that seems almost like science fiction. Tell us a little bit about this.
Sure. Well, speaking of nature-based solutions, there's a technology that's been happening in the environment for millions and millions of years, and that is there are microorganisms in the ocean, the soil, and many other places, and those microorganisms are eating greenhouse gas as their food source. And so every time you go and you swim in the ocean, that ocean is filled with microorganisms that are eating methane and carbon dioxide that is dissolved in the salt water. And one of the things that happens is when they grow, not only are they reducing the amount of carbon in the environment, but they're also building a material inside of their cells. And that material is called PHB. And it's a really fascinating molecule. Almost all life on Earth makes this material. And that ranges from the human body to plants and microorganisms. And a fascinating thing is that when you extract and purify PHB, it becomes meltable. And as a meltable material, now you have something that has the ability to replace plastic. But unlike plastic, PHB is very distinct because since it's made in every ecosystem on Earth, life understands it. And in fact, if it ever ends up back in nature, nature sees it just the same way that it sees a tree leaf or a banana peel and can reconsume it as a food source. But the other thing that's so intriguing about this process, again, that's happening every day, is that this is a net carbon reversal process. This is a carbon sink. And so you were mentioning earlier about regeneration and restoring the environment to what it once was. This is a process that plays a role in that. So we were really inspired by this concept of harnessing a technology that happens in nature every day and using it to transform greenhouse gas into a resource that creates indeed a nature positive impact that not only reverses the flow of carbon, but also can help us address our plastic pollution issue. So that's the technology that we pursued. And it took us about 10 years to figure out how to bring that into the world. And in fact, now it's about 19 years since our founding. But today we're starting to see our products, which are called air carbon, show up in locations around the US and hopefully soon the world, to the tune of about 3,000 locations today. So it was a long journey to figure out how to take what happens in nature, do it on land and do it at scale, but we're now starting to do that.
So what actually inspired this technology? Obviously, plastic is a significant challenge. What actually motivated you to go in this direction? And what role, how is this going to be made more mainstream, right? Because you've been around for 19 years. So what inspired the technology to come into reality? And then how are we going to actually make it widespread?
I think the thing that inspired the technology was this frustration. And the frustration was that, we've been talking about the urgency of climate change for so long. And that urgency, continues to accelerate. The discussions obviously continue to be more and more productive, but it's still not nearly fast enough. And so our inspiration was saying, what if we could create a consumer-driven pathway to reducing the amount of carbon in the air? It's important for us to encourage our governments to take action, whether that's carbon pricing or different regulations or funding mechanisms. Those things are really important, and they will create major impacts. But they've been slow, and they've been limited. So what if we could create market-based solutions? And so this inspiration was turning greenhouse gas, taking it from being the enemy to being a resource. Because if you could create a consumer-driven pathway where the products that we use every day help restore the environment, we felt that was something that could truly scale. And so that was our founding inspiration. And today we have a commercial scale production plant in California, where the production process starts by capturing carbon that would otherwise go into the air, and then ends with finished goods that consumers love. I wish I was on screen. I could show you my bracelet. It's made out of air carbon. We have everything from cutlery and coated paper bowls and plates, sunglasses, synthetic leather replacements for wallets and bags, a whole range of products that have a net carbon negative impact. And that's increasingly inspiring as we see more and more of our everyday products made by using greenhouse gas as a resource. So that was our inspiration, and that's the thesis that we intend to keep building on.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And I think we're going to get a little bit more insight into this incredibly innovative technology with a video. Would you like to cue up this video? What are we going to be watching here, Mark?
That is a great question. I'm not sure which video is queued up, but I'm sure it's fantastic.
Thank you for sharing your expertise in this space. We look forward to seeing your solution really reach commercial viability, and we're going to support getting it out there and making it as widespread as we possibly can. Thank you, Mark. Let's go to this video.
We believe that in order to create large-scale environmental change, you have to create a product that people love, that is cost-effective, high performance, and also sustainable. And that's what Air Carbon offers. My name is Mark Harima. I'm CEO and co-founder of Newlight Technologies. Newlight was founded about 19 years ago, and it started with this idea, really a question. And the question was, can we use greenhouse gas as a resource to make materials? So we looked to nature. And what we discovered is that microorganisms throughout nature, including and especially in the ocean, eat greenhouse gas as their food source. And when they do that, they use it to make a muscle-like material inside of their cells that we call air carbon. Air carbon is a molecule also known as PHB. And PHB is a really beautiful material. It's an energy storage material made in almost all living things, from the human body to trees to microorganisms in the ocean. And we all make it. When you extract air carbon, you can turn it into a fine white powder. And it turns out that when you do that, it becomes meltable. And because it's meltable, now you can form it into a wide variety of shapes, from fibers and sheet to solid parts. So with this in mind, we wanted to figure out where we could have the most impact today, with an overriding goal of combining nature-based technology with consumer-driven activity to help restore the environment. As a result, the first products that we've launched are in foodware and fashion. Straws that are smooth and never soggy. You can put them in hot and cold conditions, but they're home compostable and carbon negative. Cutlery that is strong and smooth, but plastic free. Our products today are being used by partners ranging from Shake Shack and Target to US Foods and Cisco. And our goal is to keep expanding our footprint so that eventually we have what we hope becomes the dominant market position in the foodware space and fashion. Today we're making carbon negative eyewear and leather type goods and working with partners like Nike to help decarbonize increasing segments of the fashion and apparel industry by replacing plastic with air carbon. We're doing something at commercial scale that was once a dream. And Eagle 3 is the first commercial scale production facility converting greenhouse gas directly into a biomaterial that can replace plastic. There's no one else in the world doing that today. The next level for us is getting to 20 billion pounds per year of production, because that's the amount of plastic that's currently being added to the ocean every year, and we want to see that come to an end in this generation. The carbon capture industry is a space that we think we can really help catalyze, and frankly help become one of the most important industries of this next century. Great for the environment, great for people, that can grow to massive scale.
So we just wrapped up Nature's Newsroom, where we reflected on yesterday, talked about what we expect today from Energy Day here at COP27 in Sharm El-Sheikh, Egypt, and anticipations for the week, what we can hope to expect as positive outcomes from this massive gathering of country delegations, private and public sector representatives. So I'm really thrilled now to welcome you to the UNDP Hour, and we are in the Nature Zone Pavilion, and we are going to do this together with the UNDP, and we don't have time for this next hour talking about energy. We'll hear about COP negotiations, and we will dive deeper into all of this above and all of our hopes for what we want to see come out of this week. So let's get things started. First up is Cassie Flynn, who you'll remember from yesterday's UNDP Hour. She is the Strategic Advisor on Climate Change, and she'll be speaking about what is going on at COP today.
We are in week 2 of these negotiations, and many ministers have arrived from around the world. A number of issues, such as on finance, loss and damage, the mitigation work program, weren't able to be resolved the first week and are now moving into this more political week of these negotiations. The COP presidency is emphasizing 3 big tracks. One, on these issues of negotiations, being able to implement at speed and scale, being able to have ambition, and being able to ensure that we have an inclusive negotiations. The second track is on presidential consultations. This is on some of these big political issues that we are going to see take forward in the course of these days. What is the role of fossil fuels? What's the role of a financing facility for loss and damage will be on the table. The third track is ministerial consultations, really involving ministers in some of these big issues that need to be resolved. The goal is to be able to really come to a conclusion tonight, maybe into the early hours of tomorrow, so that there can be a closing plenary on some of those issues to get us over the line toward Friday. Whether this happens, whether negotiators can find these issues and these areas of compromise remains to be seen.
And welcome back to the studio, to those who are here in person and the hundreds of thousands that are tuning in from around the world. We're really excited to swiftly move into our first panel, which will hopefully be a panel, but I am thrilled to have with us Alessandro, who is representing UNDP here in Egypt. Alessandro, tell us a little bit about your work here and why this collaboration has been so critical for COP27 to really succeed.
Thanks, Chata. Thanks for having me here, and I hope you are having a great time here in Sharm El-Sheikh in Egypt.
It's a beautiful, beautiful city. It's absolutely stunning. It's something about these sunsets.
It's amazing, and the atmosphere in this place is incredible, isn't it? I mean, you have people all over. So also all these noises we hear here is because there is a lot of activity and a lot of action going on. So yeah, let me go over a little bit what UNDP has been doing in Egypt, and let me start a little bit earlier, because some of the concepts we discuss here, like energy transition, have really not started now. In Egypt, with the government, we've worked on this pretty much for the entire last decade. First of all, perhaps let's look at what the government, what we did together on the energy efficiency. That's important because let's take one example. For example, on the transition between regular lighting and LED. Just in 2014 they started, right? And by 2018, we had up to 200 million bulbs turned from LED into, from regular bulbs into LED. That actually saved this country 10 to 15% of their electricity. And at that point, I think people start really seeing that little interventions can make an enormous impact in what they do. Let's go on a little bit further, and we start with one of the flagship programs we have right now on photovoltaics. Again, energy transition. This time we are looking at renewables. We're looking at solar power. So again, starting small, we're looking at small-scale rooftop. In the space of a little bit more than 3 years, we have installed solar power plants in over 140 private and public buildings, both government and from the private sectors. And that has brought the levels of solar power here from 30 megawatts only 5 years ago down to the point of where the country is now generating 200 megawatts. So if you look at it, it's almost a 7 times increase. And that is just through one program that we did with the government. We think these were very good examples on how to move towards the energy transition and how Egypt has been working to prepare an event like this already for some years.
So Egypt is where we're hosting COP27. It's got this incredible energy transition underway. And to be able to showcase that at COP27 has really been something that the Egyptian people are taking significant pride in. How can what's happening here in Egypt be scaled? What examples can be taken away by other countries who, because Egypt is really vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So similar countries could really benefit from some of the success stories coming out of Egypt.
Yeah, and you've really touched on an important area that I think particularly the Egyptian presidency is particularly keen to do, to showcase some of the work that they did in the hope that others can replicate, but also that it can scale up further beyond. Let me give you one example, and here we're talking about adaptation, because a lot of what we're talking in this COP is about adaptation, and it's about implementation. So this example is in the north coast, in the Nile Delta. And here, let's look at a couple of key figures. Right, so the Nile Delta caters for up to 50% of the GDP of this country, 30% of the population, and it's been categorized by the IPCC as one of the 3 most vulnerable deltas in the world. And here, a number of years ago, up to 10 years ago, an important intervention has started to happen, and that's about protection from sea level rise. So sea level rise, when we talk about it, we often talk about it in terms of what can potentially happen if temperature grows. Well, here in Egypt, this is already happening. So in 2010, a large major storm took place, and sea level and that resulted in coastal flooding. At that point, I think that rang some alarm, quite a degree of alarm in the government, in the population here. Why? Because this area is so important. You can imagine there is about 17 million people living around that area. So a lot of work has been thought about in terms of what can be done to protect these people. Go a couple of years ahead and you see further storms coming. And then the frequency of these extreme weather events continues more and more, up to the point now we have them every 6 months. So a large program was put together to try to prevent this water from coming and flooding this area, these important and productive areas. So if we now look at what we are now, we have a program that uses a low-cost, nature-based solution. These are low-cost dikes to protect the sea from entering and from flooding. And this is done by using really a local experience. This work was done by asking the local communities, what can we do? And they came up with this idea that, you know, if you use the power, if you harness the power of wind with the sand, and you help it by putting a little structure there, you'll be able to create natural dunes, which form basically natural dikes.
Incredible.
And we already now, we have a situation that when we have these extreme events and weather events, the water is already not moving forward beyond those dikes. So now this is a large program, is funded by the Green Climate Fund, is the largest adaptation program funded by the GCF in the North Africa and Middle East, and it's definitely looked here. We heard it, for example, yesterday showcased at the water pavilion, but in Water Day, as one of the best practices for using, again, nature-based solution. Because obviously we have to be careful that when we try to adapt, we don't create a further problem. So you can create large infrastructure, what we call them gray infrastructures, but then those will result in further problems, increase the emissions. So this is a green or a blue in some cases discussed, a solution for one of the type of scenarios that we have to be prepared to see all over the world. And if we just look at what happened in Pakistan recently and the utter destruction that generated, we see the importance of those solutions.
And I love that these are nature-based solutions, truly, right? Because there are engineering solutions that have ultimately been extremely expensive and ultimately ineffective. The Rotterdam Gates is a good example of protecting the city of Rotterdam from sea level rise and flooding, and ultimately was not actually built high enough because of the pace of sea level rise. In New York City, where I hail from, we had Hurricane Sandy and the storm surges that took out Lower Manhattan. Also, to protect against Lower Manhattan, there's all of this talk about creating these massive infrastructure projects. So maybe some of these nature-based solutions can really support vulnerable cities around the world that share some similar features, like you're saying in Pakistan, what we just witnessed, and what we know inevitably is going to be coming. So fantastic. Thank you for sharing that example. That's a very solid, concrete example that I would love for, again, our viewers around the world that are tuning in to dig deeper into, to use this knowledge, bring it to your local communities, and see how you can be part of the solution as well to overcoming this climate crisis that we all collectively face. So now we've been talking about Egypt, we've been talking about these various innovative solutions that are being presented here at COP27 that the Egyptian people should take real pride in, and obviously is a point of pride. And it's a point of pride for humans, generally, that we are able to do this. So what about the city, more specifically? What about Sharm El-Sheikh? What is happening to green the city here?
Yes, Sharm El-Sheikh, as we know now, as we could hear for 1 year, it was identified as the place for the COP27 in COP26. It was officially decided later, but we knew this was coming. And one of the first things that I think our partners in the government, in the Ministry of Environment and others were thinking was, what can we do to not only provide a hub and a place for this to happen, but also to show, while doing that, what can be done already, right? So one of the first things that we looked at, of course, was to expand the solar power program that I've just mentioned to include some of the landmark buildings in Sharm El-Sheikh. So this convention center right now is powered by almost 1 megawatt of solar panels that we've been able to install together with the Ministry of Environment, the IMC, which is a local government partner, but also, let me say here, thanks for the foresight of some of the key donors that they decided to support, the key partners decided to support. And I want to really give a shout out to the European Union here, to the government of Denmark, government of Switzerland, the African Climate Foundation. These were some of the partners that recognized the validity to support the COP presidency, right? They looked at this in terms of like, we need to do everything so that the COP presidency can prepare in the best possible way to host this historic event. So solar panels were one. We chose this place, we chose the hospital here, we chose the airport. So, all of those of you that are here, or the viewers that are actually currently here, can look up and try to see some of those solar power and so on. We also worked with the private sector, hotels. So we gave incentives to them to turn solar. So up to 15 hotels have moved to try to put that in their buildings. We work with the Ministry of Environment and the local governorate to work on plastic reductions. Very important aspect. If you think of it, the wealth that Egypt has, not only in terms of historical buildings, but the Red Sea. The Red Sea is a wealth of incredible. Do you know that we have some of the most resistant coral reefs in the world here?
I had a chance to go snorkeling, so I was able to check them out. It's absolutely stunning.
Now, those coral reefs that you see, one of the important things to understand here is that they have not yet been subjected to bleaching, like some of the coral reefs around the world. And they've demonstrated a resilience that will now be studied in order to repopulate the population of coral reefs elsewhere. And actually, just around here, we've had the launch of a program with the Green Fund, the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, that will be worked in the next few years precisely to do that, to protect these corals and to actually use and study them to be able to see that coral reefs survives around the world. Let me just say one more thing. We worked very closely with the COP presidency over these years. And some of the colleagues that we worked very closely with, they're here, they're in the negotiations right now. Some of them were supposed to be here, but the pace of negotiation is so quick, and as you heard from Cassie Flynn and others, that is very difficult to come here. We've worked together already for 9 months, providing capacity support to them, facilitating meetings of negotiators, delegations meetings, and so we had this long-term engagement that's particularly on supporting specific initiatives of the presidency. So right now, these days, what you see is every day you have a thematic day. We had water, but we also had before, finance, we had the climate security, and each of those had specific initiatives that we, along with others, were able to support.
Well, exactly, and thank you so much for sharing all of this with us and our audience that's tuning in from around the world. It's incredible, these collaborations. This is what's going to accelerate the negotiations and all the solutions that we're trying to work together to bring to reality. So, Alessandro, really appreciate your insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
It is my pleasure now to move swiftly to our next panel and introduce my next guest, Manuel Pulgar Vidal, Global Leader of Climate and Energy for WWF, and Angela Churi Kalawagi, Executive Vice President for Impact at the Environmental Defense Fund. I have no right to mispronounce names. My name is very difficult and is always mispronounced as well. So thank you for your patience with me on that one. And please do just say your name for the audience. And I'll start with you, please, Manuel. Please just say your name for the audience.
I am Manuel Pulgar Vidal, currently working with WWF International as Climate and Energy Global Practice Leader.
Fantastic. And Angela, please.
So I'm Angela Churi Kalawagi, Executive Vice President for Impact at the Environmental Defense Fund.
Okay, thank you so much. And know that we have hundreds of thousands tuning in right now, and they're eager to get into this conversation with you. So I'll start with you, Manuel. The Alliance for Just Energy Transformation launched today. This was a big announcement at the UNDP Pavilion here in COP, and there's many different organizations represented across many sectors. Tell us more about this initiative and how it's going to be realized.
Sure. Look, this alliance, it is an effort to continue promoting convergence and integration. We used to talk about just transition, but also energy transformation as silos. But with this alliance, what we are promoting, it is a strong integration, because we are in a time in which by converging our energy transformation effort, by moving into renewable energy, but on the other hand, by doing with the just approach, we will be more effective. Let me put a short example. If we think in renewable energies, we have not only to consider that transformation, but also we need to consider rights, participation, permitting, siting, and all those elements that are key to be more effective in moving the transformation in a just way. So the alliance, it is to promote that integration. The presidency of COP has already told us that this is the COP for implementation. In my point of view, it is for implementation, integration, and convergence, and that it is about this alliance.
Fantastic. And EDF, of course, has joined this alliance. That's no surprise. What do you hope to achieve by joining this alliance?
Thank you. As Manuel said, we need to move this transformation with communities. Implementing climate action is not happening in a vacuum. It's happening in communities, and we need to bring people with us. We hope that through the engagement in this alliance, we can start also changing the mindset from seeing workers and communities, seeing climate change from the perspective of workers and communities as a burden. And don't get me wrong, it is a very serious problem that has to be addressed. But to be able to turn it and look at the opportunity of engaging them to move towards clean energy solutions that address energy poverty, increase access, and so on. So for us at EDF, the core of our work is to find solutions that work, that put people at the center of the solutions. And we hope that by engaging in this alliance, we'll be able to align our work with others to be able to make a bigger impact in ensuring that we bring climate solutions that are just and fair and inclusive.
Thank you for sharing that. And this is really such an exciting announcement. And it's great to see that this alliance is coming into existence and it's being launched by WWF, which is historically seen as a conservation organization. The logo is the panda, and it really connotes conservation, restoration, biodiversity. So to be transitioning to talking about energy, how is that aligned to the historic legacy that is WWF and conservation?
It is true. We have been identified historically as a conservation organization. The panda, it is a logo that it is transmitting success, because you know how well we have moved panda to be recovered as a species. So that idea of success by putting all of our effort towards a clear objective, it is a key element. But again, if we are able to integrate our net zero 1.5 and resilient climate approach with the nature positive vision, we would be more effective. And that is why WWF can strongly contribute in this alliance to bring the conservation approach, but also a lot of effort that we have already developed towards the energy transformation. Some years ago, we developed a strong initiative to push and to continue forcing countries, corporations, local communities to adopt renewable energies as a key approach. But now what we are doing it is to integrating. Let's just think. We are used to thinking what it could be the effect of a fossil fuel activity in biodiversity. But we are not fully aware that even a site for renewable energies could affect biodiversity. So the idea is that in this alliance we will explore how to define a clear mechanism to protect rights, to protect ecosystem, to promote consultation, to develop participation. The idea is to be strongly inclusive.
I absolutely love that. Now we're talking about bridging the gap between biodiversity and energy. And these things must be talked about and must be thought through together. And so you are really doing that. You're bridging that gap through this alliance. And you also raised the issue of doing this fairly, doing this justly. And this is something that EDF has published many papers on. And I know that you have thought quite a lot about how to actually ease worker anxiety in the transition to clean energy, right? People don't like change, even though we know that change is coming. We need to support this transition, ease anxiety, and also ensure that the transition results in equitable outcomes and a just future and an exciting future that people should be looking forward to, not fearing. So how is it that the Alliance will support this? What role will EDF play in the Alliance to ensure that this transition really is just?
So the just energy transformation will require an all of society, all of government approach, all hands on deck. And we see our contribution in this process through some of the work we've done. And here I can mention a series of studies we did with like Resources for the Future that looked at what is that policy environment or what policies, instruments, incentives would be needed in societies that are dependent on fossils. What we would like to see as a contribution is how we bring in those perspectives from across the different communities of practice we engage with, so that they can already now, even in societies where there's still a high dependency on fossil fuels, start thinking about the transition and thinking about how this transition can be done in a way, in an intentional way, involving people to drive transformation. So what we hope to do is to help bring some of those insights through our work and the work of our partners and get them into the hands of the people who are in the right positions to make the right decisions, create the incentives, and to take the right actions.
Can you just elucidate the difference between the just energy transformation versus a just transition one more time, just to hammer that in?
Well, I think in the context of this alliance, the idea is we are making the transition. We have to go towards cleaner energy, more sustainable energy, a more resilient community, a more resilient future. But when we talk about transformation, it's because we want to see those changes happening with urgency. Just as Manuel was saying, we know the transition is inevitable, but we want that transition to happen with transformational power, which means that by driving change as it moves along.
Same question to you, Manuel. Talk to me a little bit more about this just energy transformation and how you view it.
Just transition, it is a key concept. Means that we will plan a mechanism to protect rights, decent jobs, bring salaries to people that must shift into a more cleaner and sustainable activity. So that is just transition. But when we combine that with the energy transformation, that it is something that we do know we have to transition because we have to phase out fossil fuels gradually, but as soon as we can, we will see the advantage of putting both pieces together. We have clarity in our energy objective, and we do know how can we do it in a just and fair way. The point is that by combining, we don't need to go one by one to see how effective we could be. We will do it together. We will, for sure, share the experience of people working in just transition, as ILO, as UTEC, many organizations working on that, with people that also it is working in the other side, the energy transformation. That is the idea of the alliance. And it is fantastic that we do have UNDP as a partner, that we do have KPMG, WWF, among some others, because that is showing that also we are combining public, private, multilateral, and civil society organizations. And that is the way in which we can be more effective and we could achieve our objectives.
This is what it takes. It takes these collaborations, and it takes coming together at places like COP27 to be able to accelerate some of these collaborations in the form of this type of alliance, for example. What are you seeing here at COP? Are you happy with how it's going? In these final few minutes of this segment and this opportunity to speak with you both, and truly thank you for sharing this this alliance and what you're hoping to achieve. It's very positive, and we're in the Nature Positive Pavilion, of course, right? So this is confirming that there are good people doing good things, and together, working together, we really will be able to overcome this climate crisis and achieve our ambitions. So thank you for the work that you're doing and for sharing the work. How are you feeling about COP more broadly? Just your final remarks, please. I'll start with you.
So I think it's really important to see the COP with its whole breadth for everything that's happening here. We have the negotiations across the road, and we have this very vibrant fair that's on this side. I'm looking at it from what's happening here. There's clear evidence that implementation is happening, that there is momentum, that different communities are talking to each other, that the solutions are there. What now we need is the political will to help glue this all together and get things moving. So I'm optimistic, and I think so far these weeks have been highly inspirational in terms of what we're hearing from the voices from the ground.
Thank you for that. Manuel, final remarks?
Look, probably audience can't listen, but this is the most noisy COP ever. But if you think that that noise is energy, you know that we are moving into the right direction. We are collaborating, many organizations are defining clear objectives, many organizations are walking the transition and are trying to collaborate. And at COP now, it is not just an issue of negotiators alone taking decisions, that still it is important for sure, but because we are implementing an agreement, we do need to collaborate. And that means that we do need to keep clearly our vision to 1.5 net zero, resilient world, and nation positive. That is the main start that should continue driving our collaboration and cooperative efforts.
1.5 is not off the table. It's a planetary limitation, it's not a target. So yes, I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. Thank you to you both so much for sharing your insights. Really appreciate it. Please keep the good work going, and looking forward to talking to you both again.
Thank you.
Let's swiftly move now to our next conversation with Dr. Imad Adli, National Coordinator, Egypt for the GEF Small Grants Program. Welcome, Doctor. It's a pleasure to have you in the studio with us today. Can you please provide viewers with some background on this GEF Small Grants Program and what exactly does a global perspective about this program? So tell us a little bit about the Small Grants Program and what a global perspective on this program is.
First of all, thank you for having me. Do I look here? I look here to you? Whatever, I look to you. Okay. So the GF Small Grants Program, last week we were celebrating here the 30th anniversary. It was it started in 1992, and the COP comes like, you know, COP27 comes at a very crucial moment that we are having the 30th anniversary. The whole concept and the whole philosophy of the Small Grants Program, which is one of the corporate programs of the GEF, is how we can think globally and act locally. So when we are talking about the GEF as a very good and strong funding mechanism for different countries, on climate change, on biodiversity, on land degradation, on international waters, on persistence organic pollutants. We find that, you know, at the end of the day, who are suffering from all these problems? It's actually the communities. When we are talking about sea level rise, or we are talking about flooding, or we are talking about drought, the people who are at the grassroots, those are the people who are suffering in the villages, in the coastal areas, in the desert, and so on. So the small grants program comes to provide solutions for the people who are suffering from these problems. And the solutions would be definitely, some of them are going to be, since we are here in the climate COP, so we have some activities that relates to mitigation. Most of the projects that we deal with are linking to the adaptation part. So how we can build the resilience of the communities to face the climate challenges, and at the same time, yes, we are providing them with local solutions, but at the end, it is adding to the climate and the global impact that we are achieving from these projects.
So tell us a little bit more about these projects. What are the types of programs that have received funding now through the Small Grants Program?
Because I'm the national coordinator from Egypt, or the project manager for Egypt, I would say that one of the projects that we are very proud of, the one that we have presented here in Sharm El-Sheikh, it's a project that deals with the farmers that are affected and suffering from the increased salinity in the soil in the north part of the delta, northeast part of the delta. And the farmers are able to adapt to the climate issues and to the salinity, the over salinity of the soil. They are producing the quinoa and dokh. Both materials are alternatives to wheat, and they can produce the same results as wheat. And we are very proud that here in Sharm El-Sheikh, most of our activities, we provide cookies and small, pizzas and so on, that has 30% of its content coming from these materials. So this is a project in which we are showing how the community could be resilient, and it could also help in the sustainable livelihood of these communities. I have another project on sustainable transport. Our program is the first ever in Egypt to establish a project on bike sharing. Bike sharing, and we have in Fayoum, which is an oasis in the north-south of Cairo, about 100 kilometers away from Cairo. And in the Fayoum University, we have the bike sharing project, in which the students in the university are using the bikes to move from the central station of the train and the bus central station to the university and coming back. So this is a kind, to reduce the emission. So one project is an example of adaptation, another example on mitigation. And we have right now in Egypt, we have funded more than 250 projects, actually 270 projects on climate issues, compared to about 350 all projects that we funded. So this means that the climate portfolio in our program here in Egypt is like 60% of our overall projects that we have funded. And I have different examples. I have also examples for women projects that are using the palm leaves that, coming from the palm trees, and they are having handcrafts to sell and produce, small things that you can use as baskets and bags and so on. And here also in Sharm El-Sheikh, in the blue zone and in the green zone, we are showing the products of the women that they are using the palm trees in their products. And I have also projects dealing with water conservation. So we have helped many farmers in the south, especially in the south of Egypt, on lining some of their canals and rehabilitating the canals. That helps the irrigation and minimize the water loss, and also increase the impact and the productivity of the agricultural lands for the people who are suffered from drought. 250 projects on climate. Of course, I cannot mention all of them, but these are some examples.
These are some very good examples, and fantastic that this support is coming into the people of Egypt and they're benefiting directly from it. And these are examples that we would love our engagers that are watching this broadcast to learn from and to bring to their communities all around the world, to show how individuals and communities can also contribute their skills and be part of the solution. And it's also Civil Society Day. So we know that everyone has their role that they're playing as part of this. What about environmental NGOs? How do you include and involve them in this small grants program and ensure that they are also part of this conversation?
In the beginning, when we started 30 years ago, the definition of environmental civil society organization was that an organization that has in its name the word environment, like Environmental Protection Association or Environment Enhancement Society or something like that. But actually what the program did, that we have built the capacity of many civil society organizations, any organization that is working for development, in community development, for any kind of development, it could be considered as an environmental society or civil society organization. This is why the number of civil society organizations in Egypt working on environmental issues and on sustainable development is growing very much. And I can consider any organization working for any kind of development as an environmental organization. But definitely, the program has helped not only to give them support, because the idea at the end of the small grants program, not to have a competition between the civil society who can provide a better service or a better project. The idea is how to build their capacity to be all of them influential and to have an impact from, and this is the good thing about the small grants program. We are helping and building the capacity, developing the capacities of the civil society organizations in the different parts of the country. We have worked almost in all the governorates, the 27 governorates in Egypt, building their capacity to know how to deal with the issues. They have, the civil society organization, they have their own capacity of reaching the communities. What we are giving them is the know-how. At some point, we tell them about the challenges that are facing Egypt. And they can interpret, they are very smart, and they can interpret these challenges into action. And today, in the COP, this is the day of the civil society, the Action for Climate Empowerment and Civil Society. This morning, I was honored to be the moderator of the opening of today of the ACE and Civil Society. And I was very honored that the Ministry of Social Solidarity, and the video that they have shown in the opening, they have taken all the examples from the small grants program, from the south of Egypt, from the north of Egypt, from Sinai, from the oasis. So this was a real success for the small grants program, that we have established this strong environmental civil society movement in the country.
Congratulations, that's fantastic. And I hear the pride in your voice, and the results of all of this efforts is clearly showcased here at COP27 in beautiful Sharm El-Sheikh, in beautiful Egypt. And so we appreciate you hosting us and for being able to give the support to the people to really contribute and be part of the solution. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's actually, when we are talking here in the COP, the negotiators sitting in the closed room inside and discussing about the future of our planet, if they have the conscious about how the communities are suffering and how the communities need, their decision to be taken, and to have this COP as an implementation COP. The implementation means that the communities will start to receive and get solutions and get better future for themselves and also for the coming generations.
Exactly. We can't just talk about it. From your lips to the negotiators' ears, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate this conversation.
Thank you.
It is now my pleasure to give the floor to Rana Adlib, Executive Secretary at REN21. REN21 is an international policy network of passionate players dedicated to building a sustainable energy future with renewables. Rana will be providing us with a short keynote. Thank you so much, Rana, for joining us in studio here in the Nature's Newsroom. Please join me over here. I will hand you the microphone, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot for this invitation and the opportunity. So, I have two boys. And when they were smaller, they were often fighting for the exact same things, whether it was a banana whether it was about a toy truck or whether it was about sitting on the red chair. And actually I noticed that as a parent, often it was not a banana about the red chair, but they had another need. It could be the need for attention, or they might actually prefer an apple. As parents, we tried to teach them to really explore what their real need was. And let's be honest, we are no superhero parents, so it took a lot of time and repetition. But today they're pretty good in stepping back and thinking about their real need. And this also allowed them to find other solutions. And this situation actually makes me think of the energy transition. Let's be honest. We all know that we need to stop using and producing fossil fuel. And we know we need to reduce the energy consumption, and we know that we need to use renewable energy. And still we struggle. We struggle so much with this change. So how can we make this change happen? And actually, I'm going to invite you to look at the energy transition from another perspective. So let's have a look at a couple of pictures. So here in this picture, you actually don't see the fuel. What you see is two kids studying, even though it is dark. On the next picture, we have the home. Think about your home. In your home, you don't want to freeze, you don't want to sweat, and when you're in home office, you really want a good internet connection. When we are looking at this fabric, this is a factory in Italy, and it could be anywhere in the world. The owner of this factory actually wants those machines to run 24/7 because this is making the business flourish. And just imagine on the next picture what happens to this operation if the energy consumption and if the energy supply just breaks. So energy is actually much more than a fuel. And all those players here on those pictures really don't care about sorry, this is not the right one, but these players don't care what fuel we are using. They're interested in having the energy service, a good quality and a reliable energy service. I think these pictures also teach us another important lesson. They show us and force us to look at the value and the benefit of energy. And I think that's also an opportunity to step back and look at the value of renewable energy. So when we're thinking about renewable energy is the solution to replace fossil fuel. And this means that we are able to reduce the carbon emission and address climate change. And we don't need a picture to show this. However, on the next photo, you'll see a photo of Paris and Cairo, so here. And this is the air pollution. The air pollution here is high and is responsible for thousands of premature deaths. In those cases, it's really important to think about which fuel we are using, because it's the fossil fuel we are using in transport that is responsible for this quality of the pollution. Now, especially when speaking about climate change, we forget to look at one fundamental part, one fundamental advantage of renewable energy. Renewable energy does exist everywhere in the world. And this means that from the citizens to the company to the city, anybody can actually produce his or her own energy. Everywhere in the world also means that we are not dependent on the production of some fossil fuel countries and on exports and imports of fossil fuel. So this means that anybody of us can sit around the table and become an active player in the energy game. So the value of renewables here is that we have the opportunity to build a fairer and more inclusive society. And this is very precious. This also means that there are plenty of great voices and stories out there that can share their experiences and the benefits of renewable energy. And we need to hear those voices, and they need to become the dominant voices which we hear when we speak about the energy transition. So, just like my boys wrestling around the red chair, over the red chair, or an apple or a banana, we really benefit to look at energy from another perspective. We benefit from it because it allows us to look at the value of it, and looking at the value, bringing the inspiring voices will allow us to accelerate the energy transition and drive the change which we need to drive. And looking at the value and the benefits of renewable energy and the opportunities it creates is also an opportunity to mobilize and inspire. Looking at the opportunities to provide energy services, reliable energy services, 24/7 hours, the opportunities to create a healthy environment, and the opportunities to build a fairer and more inclusive society. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rana, for your remarks. And we have come to the end of the UNDP Hour. This is the very last UNDP Hour out of COP27, and we are going to end it with a bang, a special performance by A.Y. Young. We've asked him to come back to the show. He's a Generation 17 youth leader for the UNDP, and he's also quite the artist. So let's have a look at this introductory video about his work.
A local hip-hop artist makes an international name for himself. He is the first artist to power his concert with 100% renewable energy.
It is a real honor to recognize Mr. A.Y. Young, the founder of Battery Tour.
It's incredible. Can't wait for you to see this. The United Nations is now throwing its support behind him.
Mr. Young has made a big impact in his young life, born in 1991. He's a singer-songwriter, a dancer, producer, entrepreneur, and sustainability advocate. He's staged and performed more than 800 concerts. He was named by the United Nations recently as one of 17 youth world leaders of the world, the only individual selected for that honor from the United States.
To stimulating this local economy further, bringing entrepreneurs together, bringing businesses together, bringing the world together so we can make some change.
I'm here to listen. Don't ask me questions. Tell me what to do. Give me ideas.
My mission is to kind of break down these silos, these barriers, and build bridges to power collective action by bringing everyone together. It's going to be incredible.
My work plan's in 3 different phases. I'm going to make an album powered 100% by renewable energy.
Right now, A.Y. Young is working on an album based on the 17 United Nations goals. Major stars like Tech-9 and Billie Eilish will collaborate.
This will be the one called Tech-9, and I am part owner of Strange Music, and right now a part of Goal One, baby.
Oh, let's go.
There are 700 million people that are still living in poverty.
The whole premise of your music is about collaboration
100%.
and about getting excited. It's about going across the finish line.
I don't think anyone can disagree that everyone needs to have access to energy, water, food. My belief is that everyone in the world, we're all these outlets for change.
Well, there's really nothing left to do now except hand the mic over to A.Y. Young. He's going to take it from here. So excited. Go for it.
here is We Can Change the World, the anthem for the Sustainable Development Goals 17 guy. Yes, let's roll the music and bring everyone together. Using music as a vehicle. Come together now. Hey.
Oh, sister, mister, look who's made a man's up. And now I can't find the reasons not to give up.
It's gonna take
Teachers, leaders, dreamers, let's go. They always take the right away. Leave the bell and make it pay. We can change the world. Is that a lie they told us? We can change the world. We'll shine a light back now. We can change the world. Hey, so we got to come together now. Got to come together now.
Hey, yeah. See, I don't like it any more than you do. Hey, but in your ignorance, that bliss is void. Hey, I think it's about time. Be humble and realize that we are one and the same, unique and one of a kind, right? Brighter days come ahead when we join together. So put your best foot forward, go and make an effort. They call me AY, I spoke to GM. Marvin Gaye, we in the grapevine. Let's have a great time, yeah. Influence great minds, I'm trying to pay my version of Picasso. This is colossal, so they always hate. Guys, this is the goal for 17. All about coming together, every facet of humanity. You can sing with me, go. We can change the world. Sing it out right now. Talking, we can change the world. Black rock, sing it out. Everybody sing, we can change the world. Oh, Frankie the Dino is so come together now. We got to come together now. Oh shoot, let's get some people over here. We got the GM team here today. The GM team, you want to dance with me? It's all about coming together. Every facet of humanity to change the world. We've got to come together through the wind and stormy weather. Hey, see, oh, we've got to come together. Hey, and we can change the world and save us from extinction. Thanks for dancing and joining. What's up, brother?
Thank you so much for that. A.Y. Young. For those in the studio audience, let's hear a round of applause. That was incredible. Thank you. And thank you so much to Frankie the Dinosaur. The party just keeps going for you, huh? Didn't you just turn 1? That's right. We got Frankie in the house, we have A.Y. Young, and I couldn't think of a better way to finish our UNDP final hour at COP27 here in the Nature Zone. And we will be back right at it after this short break. Thank you all for tuning in from around the world. To be continued in 30 minutes.